alone, but a problem that we all need to collaboratively prioritize in finding sustainable solutions for. So in response to this societal problem, South Africa launched the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence in 2020 with a focus on extensive legal reform, improved support of survivors through provision of evidence kits at police stations, expanded psychological and social services, establishment of a GBV response fund, and improved support for Thuthuzela and Khuseleka care centers. And in closing, I think that in working towards the progressive realization of Sustainable Development Goal 5, which is achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls by 2030, among other SDGs, we need all professions and all members of our society to commit to addressing this challenge with urgency. The time to act with conviction is now. Thank you very much, and I look forward to following online the rest of the launch. Over to you, Naima.
Team, and Professor Abrahams has been the study lead and the principal investigator for this work. So I want us to turn our attention to Professor Naima Abrahams, who's going to launch this morning's findings. Please give her a hand. Thank you, Professor.
Naima can't speak yet. Let's sort out the sound again.
Okay, we're sorting out this one. I promise you, yesterday when I arrived from Cape Town, they were testing this and it was working. So I'm told I can't speak it until it's sorted. Okay. Half a minute?
Yes.
Naima, it's been sorted. We can hear you now.
So I don't think the people online can hear me. But it's
can hear you.
They can hear me.
Yes, we
can hear you. But what is happening is that our mic won't be active.
All right. So people
Let's
online.
talk to you.
Do you want to speak into the laptop?
Yeah. Okay. Well, you sit up. So I'm going to hand this to you until it's sorted. So it is fantastic to see the room full, to see people online, and thank you very much for coming here and for listening once again to the story of femicide in our country. So I can continue, I can go for it.
May we confirm that colleagues can hear?
Yes, we can hear. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic.
Thanks, Abby. Good.
So in this presentation, so I'm going to do this presentation and I'm going to talk about three main things. I'm going to tell you about what the data shows us across 4 studies. I'm going to focus on a little bit on femicide during COVID-19. And then we're going to talk about, we can't stop there, we have a problem. So we're going to talk about the integrated prevention strategy for femicide as well, briefly. So I don't need to remind everybody where we are in gender-based violence in our country and globally. 1 in 3 women globally are affected by violence. My presentation. Yes, technology is amazing. AI is taking over our world, and then
They did some good editor. We're waiting on the recording.
We need to share it from there. It can't be seen on the screen here. On the Teams app here. Yeah. There we go. That's coming up now. I want this slide more. Slideshow. Yeah. Perfect. Thanks.
Okay. I think people have heard me, just didn't see the slides, and they heard me talking about what I'm going to present. And then I started talking about the issue of gender-based violence globally. 1 in 3 women are affected, but when we look at who are the women and who are the perpetrators, it is women that are in intimate relations and its intimate partner, which are the most common form of gender-based violence. Today we're talking about femicide. Femicide is the most severe form and outcome of gender-based violence. And following the pattern of broadly gender-based violence, we see that male intimate partners are the most common perpetrators of femicide. And we refer to this as intimate partner femicide. And you're going to hear me talk about that a lot. Now, you've heard earlier people talk when interested in intimate partner femicide. We were interested in women that are killed by partners, not knowing that we were actually going to learn about many other types of femicides as well. Now, the 4th femicide survey was done during COVID. And this was an opportunity that was given to us from funding that we received for the 2017 study. So I'm saying thank you to Ford again. They just provided money and they said, you can do what you want to continue with the work that you do. And we saw this opportunity. And we said, we need to understand what happens to women during COVID. So femicide, I've been working, like Leanne was saying, for more than 20 years on it. But globally, there wasn't a huge interest. There wasn't a focus on femicide until about 6-7 years ago. And United Nations now delivers a femicide report every year. And actually, our work really gets featured there as well, because we're one of the few countries in the global south that has data on it. They refer to it to gender-related killings, and they include women killed by partners in their estimates. So, for everybody to understand what it is that we mean, how we define femicide when we do the research, when we use the word femicide, and when I refer to overall femicide, I refer to women that are killed. And like I said earlier, our interest is women killed by intimate partners, and that we refer to as intimate partner femicide, a woman that are killed by a boyfriend, a husband, whether it's current, whether it's ex. And the second group, we put everybody else in the group as non-intimate partner femicide. I know it's a mouthful, but it explains what it is. So, for example, the massacre that happened 2 weeks ago in the city, 18 women were killed. Where, if we had to do the study, where would we place that woman? If we know that it wasn't an intimate partner, then that group of women could be classed under non-intimate partners. Killed. We're also able to identify whether there was sexual assault at the time of the murder. And that group of femicides we refer to as rape femicides or sexual femicides. So this is just an overview of the study, just to say the first 2 studies, our sample wasn't big enough to include accurate estimates for provinces. We did this for 2017 and for the COVID year, and that's why you won't see 4 data points for provinces. So how do we do this? In one slide, I'm going to try and explain hard work to do and amazing people that works with me on it. We start off with mortuaries. We identify all the mortuaries in the country, and then we take a sample of them. We make sure we include urban and rural mortuaries. Then we go into the mortuaries and we start off with a mortuary register, and we identify women that have been murdered on the register first. And also, our data include women that are 14 years and older. And that's because we were interested in the partner femicide. Once we've collected the information from the register, we then pull the mortuary file and we get to the autopsy report, and there we get the information of the cause of death, confirming whether it's a woman, and information about her age. Very importantly, we identify the police CAS number, the crime administration number. We now need to link every murder that we picked up in the mortuary to a police investigation. So the next phase is we go to the police. We need to find that case in the police. We need to find out whether the investigating officer who did the investigation, because only through getting the information from the docket are we able to know who killed that woman. Okay, so that's the process. In a nutshell, very hard work to do working with these systems. So I'm going to move on to results, but I want to first of all start off by saying, as researchers, we first explore our data. We've got 2 wonderful statisticians that are working with us on this. So we look at the data and we say, okay, does it look right? What is missing? Why are these things missing? And when we look at this, we need to really understand what we are dealing with. So when we look at data, I'm showing you 2 bars. The green bar, and I'm showing you now the data over the 4 studies. So the green bar is cases we could not locate in the police system, despite trying really hard. So you will see 99, it was 13%, got better, got worse, and slightly better again. But the purple bar is when we do the interview with the police officer and he tells us a perpetrator could not be identified. So now we can't allocate that case into an intimate or non-intimate, right? So this is a very worrying figure. This increased number of cases that cannot be solved. It really cannot be solved. So what do? We manage how we deal. So because if we had to analyze this data, we're going to sit with nearly 50% of the cases where perpetrators not known. So we use imputations. I'm not going to explain to you, but please believe me, it is commonly used for dealing with data that are missing. We were very fortunate that we had lots of information about perpetrators, where they are. We understand and we know if a woman is killed in the home, it's very likely an intimate partner inside. If a woman is found in the streets or somewhere else, and we use that information so that we could code the missing into one of the 2 categories. So now that you understand all the hard work in cleaning the data and getting it ready for analysis, this is the estimates. Now, estimates is what it is. It's estimated number because we're dealing with a sample. And what we see is that we had a very high number, nearly 4,000 in 99. When we did the study in 2009, we saw this amazing drop. We were excited, but we also held back our excitement. We said, you know what? We need another data point. We need to redo this. We need to make sure it's real. And 2017, confirm that there certainly were a decrease of, this is overall femicide cases. But what do we see? We see a plateau, right? We see the same numbers between the last 3 studies. When we now take that number and divide them into intimate and non-intimate, again, each set of columns is each of the study years. And this is where we can see. And if you do the calculation of 1,253 women divided by the number of days in the year, you're going to get, we still have 3 women killed a day by intimate partner from 99 up to 2020. So numbers has not changed. But, okay, so proportionally, what does it look like? What is the proportion of intimate versus non-intimate femicide? So in 99, when we started, it was about 50-50. 50% of women killed by intimates and non-intimates. But from 2009, we see the proportion of women killed by intimate partner. So we confirm over 3 studies that in South Africa, when a woman is killed, she is most likely going to be killed by an intimate partner. But I want us to be very clear that these are numbers, these are estimates. And estimates are not really the best way. It helps us to understand how many women a day, how many women a month. But actually, we need to take into account the population of the country. And the population in 99, that is the number of women 14 years and older, are not the same as it was in 2020. In fact, there was a 30% increase in the population of women 14 years and older. So the most accurate rate, the best way to do it is to put the number over the population, and we refer to that as rates. And this is what people do for many things in health, from HIV, from maternal health. We use the rates because we need to take into account the population. So from now onwards, I'm going to show you the rates. So this is the number over the population. And so 3 busy bars, 3 graphs. The first graph, the orange one, is the rate of femicide over the 4 studies. And we see that when we started in 99, the rate was 24 per 100,000 women. In 2020, it has decreased. Very similar, the rates as we expected were very similar. But it's kind of going in the right direction. Not dramatic drop, right? But it's going down. The green set of bars is non-intimate partner femicide, women killed by people who's not a partner, and we also see that decline. It was at 11.4 per 100,000 women. It's now sitting at 4.1 in 2020. Intimate partner femicide was also going in that direction. We also saw a decline. We were very excited when we were writing up these by 2017. We were saying femicide is preventable because our data does show that. We are seeing less. But during 2020, we saw an increase only in intimate partner femicide. You didn't see it for the non-partner, and we didn't see it in overall. And I think I'm trying to understand, what is it? Was it COVID? Was it other aspects of murder overall in the country? We don't really have the full answer, but we're going to try and show it to you later. The very last bar is the global data. And that global data of 1.1 per 100,000 compared to our 5.5 is actually a rate that combines women killed by partners and women killed by family members. That is how the UN present their rates. And so that's why this work is comparable with what's happening globally, because every country where it's done, they use their population as a means to calculate. So a very concerning finding was the increase in intimate partner from 4.9 to 5. And it was a statistical significant increase. So now that you understand rates, let's go to provinces. And I hope you find in your province of interest. So right on the far, on that side, I don't know if it's your left or right, is the South African rate of, this is all femicides, again, all femicides. And remember, we're comparing two years only, because that's what we have for provinces. And I put a line in, because we expect provinces to be very similar to South Africa. South Africa is considered the average, right? So South Africa is sitting overall femicide in 2020 at 10.6. Eastern Cape is the one that is way double, more than double the South African rate. And we will see Eastern Cape coming up every time in other things. So the orange bar is 2017, blue bar is the COVID year. And now you can start to see which provinces were actually increasing or decreasing in 2020. So we see Free State were doing well. They dropped from 12 to 8. A concern is we see the only province that actually showed an increase, actually Gauteng. And that increase was also statistical. We also see small provinces. There's an increase in Mpumalanga and Limpopo, but it wasn't statistical. So that's overall femicide. What about if we look at intimate partner femicide rates? Again, here we have South Africa to compare to, and again we see. But a big concern is this increase that we saw in Eastern Cape in the last year. Again, it's double what we see in South Africa. And which are the other provinces that is of concern? Again, Gauteng has come up as an increase COVID here. And so did Northwest. The small provinces are showing an increase. Free State, Western Cape, Northern Cape were doing a lot better. So this is valuable information for where we need to focus our work on, where most the women are at risk, and it is where we should be taking our efforts to and understand. I'm not going to talk to this one. This is the non-partner one. I just wanted to show you Eastern Cape remains a problem with non-partner, and we have a very similar increase, a little bit of an increase in Gauteng. Okay. That was rates. I'm not going to talk rates again. Now we're going to look at something that we were very concerned about. This is firearm-related murders. And what we saw is a beautiful decrease again. You know, when I was doing the study this year, we were amazed. We were saying, and it was actually done in the period when we started our Firearms Control Act, the implementation of that act. And we said, here is evidence of an intervention that works. Until the next time, 2017, we see a creeping up for all femicides. And in the most recent study, every single form of femicide, all femicides, intimate and non-intimate, firearms has become the most common manner in which women are killed. So more than 1 in 3 women are killed with firearms in our country. What about sexual femicides? Again, volatility. Again, changes which we try to figure out. We see a particular drop in 2017. Now, we think we're trying to figure out, what does it mean? Does it mean forensic pathology? Because we're dependent on the investigation and the forensic pathologist to tell us that they found evidence of a sexual assault. Were they better at it in 2009, when our country was actually talking a lot about rape. There were policies, there was the Zuma case, people were just aware, and it was in our discourse, rape. Did we forget about rape? Did forensic pathologists not care to do? I don't know. We're trying to figure out really why are we seeing these differences in the identity of sexual assault at the time of the murder. We've always seen it was more common among women that were killed by non-intimates, and it's remained like that. So who are the perpetrators? So this is based amongst the cases where a perpetrator was identified. So it's not imputed. So this is the number of the data that we got from the police. 60% of women were killed by the intimate partners. And in fact, the only 10% of women, so really 1 in 10 women are killed by a stranger. Everybody else, 90% of the women that are killed are killed by somebody who are known to them, an acquaintance, a family member, a partner. So, I just wanted to show you an ODC combines the family and the intimate partner. So very quickly, I just wanted to say the age of the woman, about 70% of women falls under the age between 14 and 48. Okay, and that is why that will remain the women that are in it's young women. It's women that are in the prime that are killed. So I'm going to move off from the data that I'm going to move into what does our study tell us about the criminal justice system. Now remember, right at the beginning when I was telling you about missing data, I told you about 44% of perpetrators not identified during the interview with the police. This is provinces. And so here you can, and this is proportions. So here you can see again, putting a line so that you can see which are the provinces that had higher number of missing perpetrators during the interviews. Okay? So here they are, it's KwaZulu-Natal, it's Eastern Cape, Gauteng and Western Cape, really driving the number of cases. They do carry the bulk of the cases. They are our most populated provinces, obviously, as well. That really is the distribution. Convictions. So I know that convictions, as people, departments look at it very differently, right? Very often, convictions are looked in terms of cases that are investigated and that are charged, or you can look at the cases that are considered prosecutable. And we do hear often now NPA talk and tell us that they have really good conviction rates. But we say that the real conviction rate must be where everybody who were killed are considered. So this is based on all the femicides, all the women that are killed. And it is really, in fact, I checked this how many times with the statisticians to say, are you sure this can't be real? Let's look at it again. And because the rate has dropped across all that the women that were killed in the country for each period. We saw it creeping up in 27. That was good, right? But this was COVID. We admit. Police were inundated with many things. And is it possible that the COVID affected the investigation? And therefore, if a case is not well investigated, it's not going to be accepted to go into the prosecution process. And it's very possible that we are seeing the effect of COVID. Never mind it being low overall without COVID, but COVID even made it worse. Slightly better. I don't know if a person celebrates it, but slightly better amongst women that are killed by partners than by non-partners. So another question we ask police. Amongst the cases, amongst the women that were killed by intimate partner, do you know whether that, if this was a history of intimate partner violence before the woman was killed? And it stayed about the same in 99 and 2000. About a third of cases, police would say, yes, we know. I'm not saying protection orders. That's something else. It's just that either they know of the woman have come to the police, or during the investigation they heard there was intimate partner violence. But look at the drop again in 2020. Is it COVID effect again, or are our police investigation? Is this another evidence? I've showed you how previously the number of perpetrators, but here is another evidence. Even in the case of women that are killed, investigation is being done, but police can't tell us what's in their dockets in relation to whether they know there was previous violence. So now we're going to move to COVID. And we're going to take a deep dive into COVID, and you'll have to bear with me. We first going to all understand what was COVID. And you all remember, I've got 5 minutes. I don't need to tell anybody in the room what our levels were like, but I just want to remind you, our country was almost the only country that had alcohol restrictions. And there were 4 alcohol restrictions periods during COVID. You all remember in December, again it came and we all went to fill up. But the only time we didn't just have alcohol, we also had stay at home curfews. And the only stay at home curfew was that ridiculous, that first month, 27th of March, locked in until 30th of April in our homes. Stay at home. And we were concerned. We, the field, were really worried. Women are locked up with their partners, right? But we couldn't really figure out. Our police said there were less cases reporting, but of course women were less likely to able to get to police. So please remember this, because the next very busy slide, we are going to look at what happened. So here's the busy slide. So let me take you through it. We have got bars, and each of the bars represents the number of, and this is intimate partner cases, intimate partner femicide cases per week. So we have 52 bars across here, right? And this pinkish, reddish one is the period where we had alcohol bans. So we had the first 9 weeks, we had alcohol, and this first 5 weeks were the only time we were locked up at home. Night curfew came in. For the rest of the night curfew came in. So what do you see in the pattern of the bars? Do you see the clear pattern of lower number of intimate partner cases? Definitely below 20 when there were no alcohol. Here it is in July to 9th of August, again no alcohol, here it drops again. And right at the end, December, when there was an immediate and people knew it was coming, but we saw lower number of cases. It's only this funny one. Don't understand, but it's there. So, alcohol. We very often do not speak about alcohol as an important risk factor. But here's an experiment. We've just done a social experiment where we took a whole country and we removed alcohol for periods. And we went and we were able to count the number of cases. during that period. So I think this is a key finding for us who works in the field and are trying to understand how to prevent and what are the risk factors. And we know, I don't have data about whether the woman drank or whether the perpetrator had alcohol. I don't know that. We don't get that kind of data. We wish we had. But here's the evidence about the number of cases when there was less alcohol. I hope you understood that and that you were able to follow it. So very quickly, I know I probably have no more time, but I think Prof. Ntusi told us about our mandates. We've got a national, a global mandate to decrease violence against women, in particular intimate partners. There are targets and indicators, and we have a national strategic plan, right? That was developed in the last 5 years, and it's a comprehensive, detailed plan on how to prevent violence and femicide. But femicide wasn't adequately addressing that plan. And the Department of Justice asked us to develop a national integrated strategy to prevent violence. We were very excited. We said, yes, we will do that. We can do that. We went through a process and we're not yet complete. We're near the end. We need adoption by government and final adoption so that this can be integrated into the national plan. So I don't expect you to read that, but just to realize that it was a process and we're nearly there, we're near the end. One of the things that the Department of Justice asked us is to say, you talk about only intimate and non-intimate femicide, but we know there are other kinds of femicides. And we said, yes, we know. And so we developed a list and we consulted with many people and we were able to identify different subtypes in the strategy. And our police are picking this up. Do they know whether the woman, the autopsy that they're doing, whether that woman is a non-binary, that she's a lesbian? It's very difficult unless our police are trained to pick it up. So this is something we hope we will get into in the future. I just wanted to show you what we did. We did an ecological model, we did theory of change, and we developed 5 strategic objectives. These objectives speak to a 5-year plan in trying to really start and work on prevention of femicide. Last slide. Last night, I thought, well, and Rachel and I was talking, and we said, well, what's happening about SAPS data? What is SAPS saying to us? What is happening with women that are being killed? And I pulled this from the SAPS data, the annual data. And here is 2023. And SAPS have recorded more than 4,000 women killed. So if we're going to do the study to reflect, we are in trouble with this incline. Summary, I'm not going to go detailing summary. I think the main thing is we have a problem. We have shown it's preventable because we decreased it once. A concern is intimate partner femicide increasing. We've seen risk factors, guns as a risk factor, alcohol as a risk factor. And we want the message that we should still have hope that we can prevent and we can decrease it. And we also showed the value of the study. Doing dedicated studies is valuable because this study is the only national study that tracks gender-based violence in the country. I'm ending here saying thank you very much for everybody. Thank you to Department of Justice for believing in us doing the strategy. Our funders, thank you. We were not able to do 2021 if you didn't just say to us, here's some extra money too. So thank you very much. I'm not sure. Thank you so much. You had a lot to cover. That's excellent. colleagues, this morning, just to move us on, as we delve into these results and we listen to the statistics, we must recognize that these statistics are not just numbers. They represent real lives lost. They represent families that have been shattered and communities that have been affected. Every single number that was presented today is a representation. And it's therefore imperative that we take these findings to heart and really begin to meaningfully deliberate on how we can translate our policies and our programs and our interventions to a meaningful change for the lives of women and families in this country. And with that, I want to say we are deeply grateful to Dr. Kosi Letlapa. Dr. Kosi Letlapa is here at our request, and he has very kindly agreed to share with us a lived experience of having lost his own daughter to a femicide incident. Dr. Letlapa is not a stranger to us. He is the former chairperson of the Health Professions Council of South Africa, a medical doctor himself, as well as the African Medical Association, and most recently the head of the South African Medical Association of South Africa. But he's currently an MP, and he comes here today with all of that background as a medic, as a professional, but today he's going to speak from the perspective of a father. So we want to say, sir, thank you very much for agreeing and welcome you on stage. Thank you.
Afternoon. I don't depend on technology.
Okay.
So I don't have any slides. So I'm anti-technology in that regard. It's very difficult to know where to start. But for me, I guess the issue of femicide and the issue of me entering politics seem to be related. We voted on the 30th. I spoke to my daughter to find out where she had voted. She said she had voted and she'd gone with her partner to vote 4 ways. And the following day, the 31st, we identified in the partner's home in the garage. And the person that had encouraged my family to before we talk about that, she was gone. And I'd always wondered, what is the significance of it? Now, the key issue that we struggle with as a family, there are two components for us as a family. She's gone. What do we do with it? And that's difficult. And all of us are dealing with it differently. Then there's the issue of the justice system. Which it's, as a family, this is now our next biggest trauma going forward. Because every time there's a case, there's a court hearing, you get phoned by the press and you got to relive the event. Justice, it might be a show for South Africans, but our justice system is torture for the families of victims. Because every time there's a hearing, you got to relive the event and you get quoted by the press. I mean, the matter was referred from the magistrate's court to the high court, and from the high court back to the magistrate court, bail, no bail, all those things is just an issue of trauma. But for me, as a father and as a citizen, the problem is that all these things are after the fact. Whether it's the Department of Health, whether it's justice, it's after the fact. And my commitment and what I struggle with is, how do I make sure this doesn't happen to another family? How can you deal with prevention in this matter? And that's very difficult, you get into parliament and you talk about these things for the first few weeks, and I go to the Ministry of Women, Youth, People with Disabilities. And there's very little that is occurring there, except for crying after the event. I go to the Ministry of Culture, Sports, Culture, and whatever else that sits in there. And the minister gets perplexed when I say to him, what are you going to do about femicide? What are we going to do about gender-based violence? So effectively, the issue of women not being seen is wired into our societal values. And until we deal with that, we won't be able to prevent this. So you do excellent work in terms of what you do, but this is what I call bottom of the cliff stuff. This is the after the event stuff. But we are not doing anything about what are the causative factors. You know, I met the young man. My daughter introduced him to us. He's been to our family. Me and my wife approved. There were challenges. And my daughter said, we're talking about these challenges. What I reflect on now, and you look at him, he's a normal young man. He's been a head boy at some school. You look at his profile or CV, whatever you want to call it, it's not. And the question I ask myself is, how does society turn young men like that into killers? And that's what we produce. He's what he is because of the society that we are. That's what we need to look at. It is not surprising, but it might be a deep correlation to say Eastern Cape is the West Province. When you look at a cultural practice of going to the mountain, circumcision, what I've always seen and what I've always experienced, even as a young man, I mean, I went to Fort Hare for a year, mixed with people from the Eastern Cape, is that when they come out from the mountain, they are worse human beings than before they went in. They have a blatant disregard for women. They have even more disrespect for any man with a foreskin. And that's what it produces. And they wear that on their sleeves. And that is promoted. When you look at what happens in our parliament, where we have a department of traditional leaders and cocked, and you hear some of the talk that we have in the bus moving from the village to parliament, misogyny is glorified. Women are demeaned. I mean, the president spoke about patriarchy and misogyny. And when we talk traditions and culture, those are some of the things that are protected and elevated in that milieu. And unless we open up to dealing with the issue of the impact of what we call traditions and culture on women not being seen and women not being treated equally, we'll never see them. And for me, it's about going to the top of the cliff to say, what type of boys are we producing? And dealing with those aspects. You know, I said in one of the meetings, and we were talking about rape and murder. And I said, these are cultural values. These are cultural values because they are driven by the culture. Where women are not seen. And we now have a serious challenge in our society where the economy is no longer based on brute strength. It's based on whether you use the synapses in your brain better. Women seem to do that. And given how we socialize men, that creates a problem. That creates a problem. So any woman that basically can use God-given talents and achieve is basically threatening themselves by going into an intimate relationship with a mate. So what have we created? And those are the issues that we need to begin to talk about. Where we produce young men that love, where we begin to talk about relationships as partnerships. You know, I was saying, someone said, this is so embedded in our social structure that we need to begin to talk. And I give a simple example. When people get married, we talk about them going into marriage as husband and wife. And what we do not consider is the social construct of husband and wife in our society. And it is in those social constructs that women are endangered. And it has become so institutionalized, it's normal. So not seeing women has been normalized. And until we deal with it, we're not going to get on top of it. And I suggested that we could begin by considering that when people get into marriage, they are not pronounced as husband and wife. They are pronounced as partners in marriage. And you'd be amazed if you just change the construct and you say you're partners, what impact it has on the quality of the relationship between the two. Because when you say we're partners, it has a different meaning to when you say, I'm the husband, you're the wife. Because that comes with social connotation. You know, I remember my father coming home, and he wasn't, he was happy because he had some lubricant. And one of his things was, you know, I'm the head of the family. And excellent guitar. I play the guitar in this house. And you guys, your job is to dance. And he says, it really doesn't matter whether the music is in tune or it's out of tune. All you must do is dance. And that's the social construct that we need to reverse, where we bring up girl children and boy children as equals, as partners. I mean, I remember my son standing up one day, and we were standing in the garden in our home with him and my wife. And he looked at us. He was not even care. He looked at us and he said, oh, if you guys die, it means this house is mine. But he's got a sister. He's got sisters. But that's what he's been socialized to. And those are the basic things that we have to begin to talk about in how not seeing women is embedded into our normative social values. And it's across cultures. I mean, if you look at the reversal of the rights of women in the US, where they can't even decide on what happens to their own bodies, you see that this misogyny and patriarchy is on a comeback train. And we need to stand up and deal with it. So for me, there's the personal pain of losing my daughter. But there's the responsibility of being a leader in society. So it's going to be a question of, as I mourn, how do I use it to create a safer society? So what makes me not sleep at night is making sure that this doesn't happen to anybody else. Because this is the greatest pain that I felt in my life. This is the biggest loss, and the challenge is, how do you deal with it every day? And every day is different. You know, I always remember what my teachers taught me at medical school. We had Professor Marivate, Dr. Pitswe, Mr. Shweni, Professor Jake Moody. And they used to say, you know, about statistics, and we talk about maternal mortality, and you talk about the number. But what they taught us was that, remember this, for the family where the mother dies, for them, the mortality is 100%. It is not the percentage that you talk And once you are in that 100% place, you look at things differently. Because it's no longer a statistic. It's no longer something you read about. It's something you have to live with every day. It's something you carry with you for the rest of your life. So my challenge for the researchers and for the cancer is to say, you're doing wonderful work at the bottom, but we need to confront the issues at the top of the cliff, from where women are being thrown down. So we got to stop women thrown down the cliff. It is embedded in our social norms, and we should confront it. We should live up to this constitution that talks about human rights and people being equal. We should be intolerant of anything that demeans women. One of my greatest failures as the president of the Health Professions Council was that we had complaints about the training platform, days of abuse for women. And we referred it to the Human Rights Commission. And to date, they've never been able to move on that. So part of the places where we need to protect women, women are not safe anywhere, whether it's at home, whether it's at work, whether it's at school, or whether it's at our centers of higher education at tertiary level. And we need to be intolerant to men that get suspended on full pay, where reports gets put under the carpet by university administration, and these matters are not done. So I'm going to ensure that the matters that I know of that has been swept under the carpet by institutions like this, like all the others, that they will be brought up front. We have a woman that has written to us about being violated and being raped by a senior in an institution, and that person is being protected. We're going to ensure that those people are protected. Not seeing women is pervasive, and all of us have a duty to ensure that we stand up to the social constructs that endanger the lives of women.
Sobering words. A family that's still being shattered. I think as a unit, and certainly as part of this morning's deliberation, we are committed to working very much in partnership at the top of the cliff, so that we see fewer of our women being thrown off the bottom. Colleagues, two things. One is I just want to remind everyone that is online to please post your questions and comments in the chat. My colleague, Dr. Nwabisa Shai, is here, and she, at question and answer session, will be directing questions to speakers appropriately. But for now, we're going to change gears a little bit. And I introduced our guest speakers this morning. I'm going to invite the first panel of speakers to come up on stage. Join me up on the stage. There's a couple of chairs here, and we're going to have a conversation. And so I would like to invite from the Department of Women, Youth and People with Disabilities, Ms. Esther Maluleke, if you could join the stage. Chief Director from the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, Advocate Praise Kambula. And Director for Youth, Gender-Based Violence and Victim Empowerment from the South African Police Services, Director Mbali Muradi. If you are available, please do join us. So we're going to have a conversation for the next couple of minutes, and then once we're done, we will then continue with the next panelist representing civil society and the private sector. So what I'm going to do is just ask a couple of questions, and firstly to say thank you very much for joining us. And I just want you to direct a few questions to you. I think I will start with you, Maluleke. representing the Department of Women, Youth and People. The President has just signed into law the bill around the gender-based violence and femicide council. We've also heard massive commitments from the presidency and generally the leadership in this country around addressing gender-based violence and femicide. So firstly, we'd like to hear a response to Professor Naima's launching of the study, but also tell us a little bit about the council and how it's thinking about mainstreaming femicide prevention. Oh, sorry. Can I move the computer to them?
Please, can you move this closest?
Oh,
Thank you.
moving the speaker. Yeah, she said move the speaker. So, do you want to speak? Maybe just project a little bit.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I just wanted to firstly recognize Honorable MP Dr. Lekapi, who is also a member of our portfolio committee. I'm trying my best.
You can speak into the for the online audience. I'm so sorry to do this to you.
Okay. Sorry, I was just observing protocols and recognizing academic leaders, researchers, colleagues from government, and I hope all protocol observed. The question that I was asked is about basically what is happening with the National Council on Gender-Based Violence. As you all know, the President has signed into law the National Council on Gender-Based Violence bill. At the moment, and I heard Dr. Lekapi saying the department is not doing much. I guess it's a perception out there, but also there are reasons, and I'm not going to sit here and come with excuses. I'm just going to tell the truth as is, that the issue of resourcing, the work that we do, is a big one. And it's not only a problem for civil society and other key stakeholders that are involved in the fight against gender-based violence, but it's also a problem for government itself, especially those that are mandated with the responsibility to actually mainstream issues of women, youth, and persons with disabilities, but specifically to respond to gender-based violence. So that is the reality that we have to grapple with. And it's not because of lack of effort. And the reason why I'm saying this is because though the bill has been signed by the President, we are stuck, we can't establish the council because there's no money for it. That's why it can be promulgated and finalized. So until we have assurance that Treasury, and we have made several attempts to engage the National Treasury around this matter, we're not getting the kind of response. The latest letter I can tell you went again, it's not the first one, just yesterday, to remind Treasury that we have a responsibility to do this, and that we can't start, and that the President actually pronounced on the 9th of August publicly that he wants this council like yesterday. The minister was there, but we can't move because there's just simply no resources to recruit, first of all, But once you recruit, what are they going to do if they don't have the resources to actually do the work that they need to do? So really, in a nutshell, that's the response.
Thank you very much for that response. I'm going to move over to you, Advocate Kambula. Also, just to hear from you, I know your department has been really at the forefront of services, particularly for vulnerable populations, including women, and in your section particularly. We'd like to also just get a response to the findings that you heard today. But I think what we'd really like to hear from you is the movement around the National Integrated Strategy for the Prevention of Femicide, which is the first of its kind that we've heard of since we've started talking about GBV. So if you could just give us a response to those questions.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you to move the laptop over because the mic in here is going to help. Okay. It's connected to the speakers.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for the question. I think first is for me, of course, we have recognized the protocol for all of us. For all of us. For all of us. First is to thank the MRC, for the great work that they have been doing on femicide. And I believe that you are the only institution that has provided figures that we need, in the country, and actually painted to us the numerical picture of femicide, because we have been saying that there is a scourge of femicide in South Africa, but unable to put a figure to it. But you have done that. And it is helping all of us in government. And I believe that is one of the reasons that the Department of Justice found value with you. And we are happy with this partnership. I received a document from them that was saying that let's partner for 8 years. And then I said that why not 10? Why not 10? And after I have said 10, then I was wondering as to why not 20, all right? So that the work continues beyond us, because we're going to be leaving very soon. We're going to be leaving very soon. So now, coming to the question as to what is it that we are doing with the national prevention strategy, first is to acknowledge that this is a strategy that was developed by MRC, all right, commissioned by the Department of Justice. So we have the document, and it's quite a brilliant piece of document. But when you come into implementing something like that in the country, and will be the first, all right, because we had to start from the beginning to say that what is going to be the country definition of femicide? Because you can as a country, you have to have your own definition, so that definition, first, it must be aligned with the Constitution, and then get into pieces of legislation that are being drafted. But first, we have to say that within the social context of South Africa, what is femicide? And that is the brilliant work that they have done. Because right now we have a definition of femicide, our country definition, that is aligned also to the UN a definition of femicide. So now, with this document that we have, when you are taking a strategy to Parliament, it has to be accompanied by a strategic plan, all right, for implementation. And we cannot implement alone as a Department of Justice. So it has to be implemented by all stakeholders. So that is the work that we have just finished doing. And we are hoping that now it's going to be getting, that attention that we need, so that the cabinet can consider it and also look into it through the NSP as well, because we have the NSP, so we don't want these two documents, to be separated, but that is what we are working on right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Advocate Kambula. I'm going to, sure. Okay, I'm going to move over to Director Mbali Ngadi, representing the South African Police Services. Of course, we've heard a lot about conviction rates, and we've heard a lot about missing information around perpetrators, particularly of femicide. And recognizing all of the challenges, resource challenges that this police services face, how can we work together in a way that is meaningful and effective to ensure that every person that is guilty of perpetrating a femicide goes through the process of conviction and prosecution? Speaking there.
Okay, it sort of changes the brief of what we're going to say.
You can feel free to share also.
I wonder if you don't mind if I reveal this one in terms of the original. And of course, recognizing all protocol observed, and particularly encouraged and that Dr. Lutapa by your courage, particularly here, because I think you pointed exactly to where our problem is in prevention, socialization. How we bring up our young boys and girls and the attitudes that they then develop later on in life. However, could I just start, because I had been requested to comment on the alcohol and firearms issues. I'll also go into the perpetrator identification issues, and then let me deal with this femicide cases not on the police system, because I was trying to figure, actually, let's start there. I was trying to figure, how do we have femicide cases that are not on the police system? I think that's the question I asked yesterday. But then I'm glad to see now that the source of data would have been the mortuaries. But still, what puzzles me is how that data isn't on the system. I don't get it. Maybe if we could have you specifically identify the chunks that are not reflected, where they were reported, and all those details, by whom and so on, then we can try and track and trace and see what happened then. But then just to come back to the issue of the alcohol correlation, it seems we've come full circle. When around the end of the first quarter in 2020, we reported that what has been happening, we've been seeing, is that there is a reduction in gender-based violence cases. Nobody believed us. They were like, no, it can't be. The abuser is locked in with the victim. There's just no way that there would be reductions. Now we know why. It is the correlation of alcohol to that. Now, saying that alcohol is not a cause, guys, it's an enabler. It makes it easier if you had the intention to, abuse in any event. It makes it easier, to release all your problems with that and moving full on into the abusive behavior. It's an enabler, a precipitating factor, and not the actual cause. But I'm glad to see that we have that scientific evidence of we were not lying. And these are the patterns, and we now know why. It was because of the total lockdown on alcohol sales. And you will also notice that around the end of the month, there are peaks, meaning again that the buying power of whoever it is who uses alcohol to enable abuse then goes up. And of course, the highest ever is between the 20th and 26th of December, Christmas time. Absolutely, it makes sense. So thank you, MRC, for that scientific evidence. But could I then come back to the issue of firearms? The issue of firearms is this. There's no more lethal way that a person can be killed other than through a firearm. Your chances of survival are very slim. Now, in our process, it is a legal requirement that the applicant spouse, the applicant's neighbors, all the people that the applicant stays with in their residence should be interviewed to establish their fitness to possess firearms. What's their character? What's their temperament? Are they quick on the trigger? Are they easy to offend? And so on and so forth. So that assessment being conducted. And do you know what happens, guys? What happens is that spouses and people within the family or people who share the residence will normally paint a rosy picture of the applicant. Why? Again, it's a complicated issue. It could be that they don't want to be perceived as having sabotaged the application. It could be a whole range of issues. The power and control issues. So again, this is just something to request people to really take note of and be absolutely honest. And if the person has a hairline trigger of a temper, please let that be revealed, because then that will mean that they are not issued with a licensed firearm. All right, then moving on to the issue of perpetrator identification. Now, there could be a whole range of issues why perpetrators are not identified. No witnesses, crime scene tampered with, matters still under inquest, meaning that if the cause of death is not known, then the inquest will be conducted in order to establish cause of death. If it is found that it was due to somebody else's actions, then again, you would have to investigate who that person could possibly be. We have people making false statements. I'll be told somebody in a white car moved in that direction, whereas it was a red car in the opposite direction. You see where we're going with this? So there's a lot that goes into the investigation that would actually, here's others, fingerprints, DNA not on database. We particularly with your first-time offenders. So it's some of those issues that become an issue of problems for us. But coming back to the question, where can we work together? We have this action plan on gender-based violence, which is very much similar to what the National Strategic Plan looks like in terms of our focus areas. The only difference is instead of an economics pillar, we have a training pillar, a training focus area. And now in the preventative partnerships, This, I think, would be the areas that we can work on. In the research partnership, again, because we have a research pillar, is another issue that we could, work together. Yeah, in a nutshell, thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for responding. I am going to relieve you all of your question and answer session now and call the next panel. But please, can we give a round of applause? And that is from LNS Threat Management and also a forensic psychologist, Dr. and Associate Professor Gerard Labastrakni, if you can join me on stage, CEO of Gun-Free South Africa, Ms. Adele Kirsten, and Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Response Fund Program Manager, Dr. Tarang Mandan. Thank you very much. I am going to ask you to just navigate that laptop just for the online audience. Thank you so much for doing that. Perhaps I'll just, by the way in which you've sat down, I'll start with you, Gerard, if that's okay. So Gerard, we've heard a lot about police investigations. We know that you have done this work in a range of different settings in South Africa and now currently in your private practice. I suppose the big question is how can we move forward towards an improvement in investigations, taking everything that Director Mngani has taken into account, particularly around femicide, given that our country is so pressed by this issue?
Thanks very much. Obviously I can only speak to my own experiences. As you mentioned, I was in the police for 14.5 years working on violent crime cases. And since then, obviously with my work at WITS in the Forensic Medicine Department, we've been doing quite a bit of research about police attending autopsies as a very basic example. Oh. And we've done numerous studies over the years. And I mean, I've just scribbled down in my notes some of the stats, just in terms of any law enforcement official attending an autopsy, whether you are the detective or you are the crime scene, LCRC crime scene member. And when we looked at our results, in 2006, 0.4% of murders at the Johannesburg mortuary, which is one of the biggest in the country, 0.4% had a detective attending the autopsy. If we jump to 2012 to see if it was any different, 1.7% of autopsies at the Johannesburg mortuary had a detective. If you look at the crime scene people, in 2006, in terms of crime scene people attendance, 0. So now you have exhibits such as rape kit exhibits, ballistic exhibits. Who's taking charge of those? They're left at a mortuary until one day someone picks them up. And because there wasn't a detective there, he might not even know that there are exhibits to be collected. And we jump forward to 2012, and it went from 0% to 0.3%. So now a student of mine did a study in 2021, and it improved slightly in the sense that purely looking at violent crime murders, violent crime autopsies, 2.7% was there a law enforcement official there. If you're not even bothering to attend the autopsy, how much effort are you putting into your investigation? You also have on the other side of it, forensic pathologists who have to do autopsies with absolutely no contextual information. All they will get typically on the SAP 184, which accompanies the body, is found dead, with a little stick figure drawing of a person who represents the deceased. So your forensic pathologists are doing literally blind autopsies. They're very rarely called out by the investigating officers to the crime scene, which there's always a forensic pathologist or representative from forensic pathology services on standby to be called out, but they don't get called out. So even something as simple as determining post-mortem interval, how long has this person been dead for, you cannot do once the body's arrived at the mortuary. And we saw it with the rape study that we did, where detectives who go out to the crime scene, that's one of the factors that showed an increased chance of the case being solved. Now, I don't think it's purely the magical presence of the detective going back to the crime scene to see where it happened, but I think it represents how much effort is that detective putting into his case. If he makes the effort to go to the crime scene afterwards, he's probably the detective, or she is probably the detective, who's going to put in general more work into their cases. And I think that's one of the hugest problems for me. We can take it a bit further and say, why don't we have homicide units? good God, our murder rate purely justifies it. But we don't. We will leave 2 or 3 detectives per police station to be investigating all unnatural deaths. So someone who fell off the roof while they were cleaning their gutters, unnatural death. A vehicle accident, unnatural death. And then, of course, the good old-fashioned straightforward murders. How on earth can we expect 2 or 3 detectives who are probably sharing one car to have success? So you'll have on average 20 to 30 dockets. I mean, in the UK, as just a comparison, a team of 20 detectives go out to a murder scene. One of them, yes, will have the responsibility for preparing the docket for court, but he has 20 people who he can dispatch immediately to make inquiries, to knock on doors, to make sure the crime scene is properly controlled. Now we expect one detective to manage the crime scene. Think back to Oscar Pistorius, where I was also involved, and expecting that one detective to coordinate everything and to follow up immediately investigations that somebody saw this person possibly with the individual an hour ago, but I've got to stay here and make sure the crime scene is properly processed. We expect unimaginable outcomes from someone in those circumstances. So it's a systemic problem. It's also an effort problem. And you'll see if you go to the forensic pathologists, they'll say there's 1 or 2 detectives who will always come to their cases where there's an autopsy. It should be the absolute rule that everybody will go to an autopsy. And again, as I said, we've got the other side of it is we expect miracles from 2 or 3 detectives by themselves. And that's probably the biggest problems. Then later on, it becomes a command and control training issue. How long does it take for processing the forensic exhibits becomes the sort of the wider ripple effect. But I'll stop there because I know we want to hear from our other speakers.
Thanks very much. And perhaps something just for us to reflect on, because I think in summary, there's clearly a resource issue and there's a training issue. And perhaps that's something we need to be taking away in terms of investigations. I think general murder investigations and then particularly also femicide cases. Thanks for that, Gerard. Adele, I'm going to move to you. So I think I'm going to start by saying, particularly in relation to the gunshot wounds that we're seeing in the femicide cases, is this surprising? And secondly, what can you tell us about the access to guns, both in terms of whether we're seeing increased applications for gun licenses, or are we seeing more access to illegal firearms circulating in communities? So just your reflection, Adele. Thanks.
Thanks, Leanne, and thanks to the MRC for inviting Gun-Free onto this platform. You want me to talk louder? Yeah, okay. I do have quite a loud voice. I sometimes get told to tone it down, so it's nice to hear. I think what we're seeing with this data is, and this is a global phenomenon, is that generally gun-related homicides track overall homicides. And we are seeing that pattern that intimate femicide is now gun-related homicides are tracking that as well. And just to talk specifically about South Africa, so what we've seen over the last 30 years, which is kind of the period that Gun-Free South Africa has been tracking and working on this issue, is you see this up-down pattern. So late 90s, expected peak of violent crime, 34 people shot and killed every single day. Our highest murders were posted in the 98, 99 data. Introduction of a new gun law, plus a really integrated kind of more whole of government response to crime, national crime prevention strategy, etc. In the femicide study that's done in 2009, but also important MRC study done by Richard Matsopoulos, you see this almost 50% reduction in gun-related deaths from 34 to 18, and you see it in femicide. So what you see in the femicide data is stabilizing of means of death, sharp force and blunt force. But you see this almost 50% reduction in the use of guns in intimate femicide. And then we go up, and we know what happens 2010, 2011, this year-on-year increase. We are back to 33 gun deaths a day in this country, and you see it again in the 2021 femicide. I think I found, Dr. Leklape, your stuff really very powerful. And it's borne out by the gun data globally in countries that have gender equality, where men and women are seen as equal. They have low gun ownership rates. They have less tolerance towards violence against women, and they have less murder of women. And so it's absolutely, I mean, that's the upstream work. In terms of the evidence is clear globally. Availability of guns increases gun murders. It's just, you take guns out of the equation. It's a partly upstream, it's not to the top of the cliff, but it's a policy position. Is you reduce access to guns, it enables you to create the climate to work on reducing demand, to shift the majority of men, 80% of guns are owned by men. Men are the primary perpetrators of gun violence, they're the primary users of guns. And you look at industries where a gun is a tool, like police, security, private security, military, the majority of people in those professions are men. And we know from MRC data, I think it was 2009, is that women are most at risk if they're married to a man working in that industry. And why? Because he's got easy access to a gun. It's a tool of his work. To come to I think we need to be careful around the link between gun ownership levels and levels of gun violence. It's not a straight causative thing. It's about other contexts and what else is happening in the society. But if we look at the data, some really interesting stuff, and this is not a deep analysis, so there might be some holes in the analysis, is we have a two-tier licensing system in South Africa where you apply for a competency certificate. So that's your intention to get a gun license, but you first have to get the competency. That's when all the background checks get done, etc. And then it goes up to HQ here to Central Firearms Register, and then you apply for the gun license. So those numbers will be slightly different. And these are numbers of application. So usually often you'll have greater numbers of competency certificate applications compared to licensing, because competency is where you get kicked out the system if you don't meet the criteria. Okay, so you'll see greater competency applications to licensing applications, and these are just applications. This is not approval. So it's telling you about the demand. Okay, so these are licensed guns. So in 2013, round about then, so we're talking 10 years ago, just over 80,000 license applications were received. And it was 96,000 of the competency. And we see this year-on-year increase. But what you see in 2021, 2022, and it's linked to the July 21 unrest, 200,000 competency certificate applications from 108 in 13, 14. If you see this dramatic increase, so demand is driven by people's feelings of insecurity, poor policing. I mean, a whole range of reasons why. Demand is also driven by men's understanding of their own masculinity. But you have this dramatic increase year on year, and then it jumps 2021, 2022. Those two financial years, you see this big jump. And of course, the most recent 2022, 2023, it comes down, but it's stabilizing, at 140,000 firearm license applications compared to 10 years ago, where it was 84,000. So there is gun availability will increase gun deaths. It's as simple as that. You take the gun out of the equation, we can dramatically reduce our gun deaths. But right now, there's not enough urgency being paid to this issue.
Thanks very much, Adele. I mean, I can continue listening to you all, but I do want to let the conversation flow. Just as an anecdotal, but I have been in conversation because of the nature of the work that we do and the people we speak to. Anecdotally, have also been hearing that a number of women are increasingly wanting to apply for guns to keep themselves safe. And it's not necessarily a question I want you to respond to, but something that I want to raise awareness of. If we're talking about direct relationship between gun availability and death, one shudders to think what the implications of women increasingly are, and perhaps maybe that's something we need to be looking for in the next round of data. Do you want to respond?
Well, industry, marketing, constantly looking for new markets. You think of tobacco, you think of alcohol, you think of sugar. Firearms is along there. This is big industry needing new markets. And the gun lobby fear-mongering, saying that you will level the playing field. And the evidence shows that guns are not effective in self-defense. The gun will be taken off you and either go into the illegal market. 24 guns are lost and stolen every single day in this country. Legal guns feed the illegal market. So we have to cut off the supply. But yeah, the women are a big market for women, especially given this data we see. And the way it's marketed is level the playing field. Get yourself a gun.
Yeah. Theory. Thanks very much, Adele. I'm going to move over to you, Tirani. So Tirani, as I said, represents the Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Response Fund. And Tirani is a friend and a colleague, actually worked in our unit for a number of years before joining the fund. But you're going to be wearing your fund hat this morning. And clearly a very clear call and commitment from the fund in terms of addressing both gender-based violence on the one end of the continuum and femicide on the other extreme end of the continuum. Can you tell us a little bit about your response to what you heard today, and how do you think the fund is either prioritizing or can prioritize prevention efforts around GBV and femicide?
Thank you, Leanne. Good morning, and good morning to everyone. It's allow me to stand on the existing protocol as well. It's great to see this work come full circle, because I used to be one of GHRU colleagues. Following the launch of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide in 2020, Professor Ntusi and Nahima spoke about the GBVF NSP. The President commissioned the launch of a private sector-led fund. And that's how we came to being. And the sole purpose or the core mandate of the fund was to ensure that there was, to some degree, some resources that would enable the implementation and the delivery of the strategic commitments that are made in the National Strategic Plan, particularly at the community level. So speaking to Dr. Litlape's issue, to say these issues are happening right in our homes, in our families. That's where we need to be, and that's where we need to embed this work. And so the fund works in various ways. There are multiple strategic programs that we implement in the fund. However, we are not a direct implementer. So we catalyze action by ensuring that there is investment. And ever since our inception, we are now nearing about 200 million of investment in the sector. We have been building capacity in the sector to make sure that our implementing partners at the community level do this work and do it well. Because as a fund, we have also set ourselves a challenge to say we want to embark on ethical funding. We just don't want to partner with organizations that are doing work for the sake of doing the work. We need to make sure that we're doing the right things. We need to ask ourselves, why are we still counting the numbers? We know that the GBV problem in our country is too big. GBV manifests itself in many ways. So femicide is only one type of a GBV that we are faced with as a society. And we also are aware that there are many aspects of underreporting in the country. So how much more about the many other women who are stuck in our community and are stranded and are left in the cold, and they are stuck with their perpetrators. So in our work, actually, since the beginning of 2024, we have embarked on a funding allocation process with the support of our friend and colleague Nwabisa from the MRC. She's been guiding us. She's a friend of the fund. And to date, since the beginning of the year, we've allocated or committed 90 million rands to about 130 organizations. one of the things that we've insisted on, speaking about doing this work and doing it well, is implementing evidence-based interventions. If we want to see a shift, let's do things that matter. Let's do things that we know are gonna work. So again, speaking about the whole of society approach, we recognize that it's not all up to us or our implementing partner to solve this problem. GBV is too big of a problem for our country. So we've had to embark on other strategic partnerships at the community level, but we also have to work with children, even at the ECD level. And that's how bad the problem has become. We have asked ourselves, it's not enough to work with children when they are in school without necessarily working with their parents at home. Because when these children are taught not to bully each other, not to, to avoid GBV in dating relationships, for example, how about when they go home? So we cannot just leave out the parents out of the conversation. The parents need to be brought into the conversation, working with men and boys because of these issues of toxic masculinity, addressing patriarchy in society, working with fathers to make sure that they become involved in the raising up of their children. But we also know that as a country, we are faced with structural drivers of violence, and at a macroeconomic level that are it's too big of an agenda for anyone to try and solve that. Issues of unemployment, issues of hunger, because we know that some women tend to remain in abusive relationships particularly when they are dependent on the perpetrator. So we need to make sure that our work also address that, to empower women economically so that where possible, they're able to separate themselves and their children and get to places of safety. And some of this work, we also have to integrate it in the work that we do around shelters as well, where women have to run for safety. Professor Dr. Litlape was talking about women unsafe anywhere in our country, in our society. And that's the reason that actually propelled us to launch what we call a private sector coalition, because women are experiencing GBV at home, in the community, and harassment, but also in the workplace. So we've gone back to the private sector donors that are funding us. And by the way, let me say that we are not only funded by private sector, but there are other donors like the Ford Foundation, bilateral donors like the UK government as well, that are funding us on annual basis. So just to recognize the Ford Foundation in the room. So we've gone back to our private sector donors to say, what are you doing for your employees? Because we know that since COVID, the world of work expanded, right? Beyond the workplace. People now work at home, both at home and in the office. So what happens to the employees when they are at home? It's equally the responsibility of the employer to make sure that their staff are safeguarded. And also to bring the conversation in the same way that, with HIV, for example, we know that the messages were right in front of our faces. Because I think we tend to make these assumptions that GBV has got a black face, has got a poor face. But how about the GBV that occurs in Sentin behind the high walls? And that's why we have also embarked on a social behavior change campaign called Respect, because we're in a world with respect, there is no GBV. So we've been implementing all this work, both at the primary prevention level, but also at the secondary prevention level. And an example to that effect is the work that we're doing in partnership with the Minerals Council and the National Prosecuting Authority, because we are expanding the footprint of Tutuzela care centers in cases where women get raped. We've been hearing about rape the entire morning, and making sure that those victim empowerment programs at the police stations, in courts, are working effectively to provide that support mechanism for the women. So we believe as a fund that the vast majority of our investment must go towards prevention, because that would see us stopping violence before it begins. But we know that this is not easy work. It involves social norms. We've been hearing about changing norms, behavior change, and that takes time and it takes resources, but we are committed to staying the course. So I think that's where I'm gonna stop for now.
Thank you very much, Sirazi. Great. Okay, I'm going to swap mics with you. Thanks very much. And I think I am going to say thank you very much to our panelists. I know that we will have questions directed to you from the audience. I feel a little bit like a flight set in pilot. You know, you leave late and then you're expected to land on time. So we started a bit late, and so I'm still trying to be respectful of time and commitments. Okay, so now we're going to turn our attention to a question and answer session. And for those of you who are online, Dr. Nwabisa Shai is facilitating questions. I'm going to ask you, Nwabi, to select a few. Obviously, you can't take all questions because of time, and then relay those questions to us. And then for the people to whom the question is directed, I'll ask you to just take a note of your questions, and then you can give us a response one by one. Otherwise, it becomes a little bit. But I'm going to give the room a first opportunity to firstly respond to what you've heard this morning. We've heard a lot about the surveillance study. We've heard a personal account. We've heard government responses, civil society responses, and all of the efforts also on the gender-based violence response. By show of hands, please can you tell us who you are? And if I can ask you to please keep the questions very brief so that we give everyone an equal opportunity to participate. Nikki.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the information today and the launch. It's just so sobering. For someone like Nikki Lulu from the Full Foundation, for someone like us, in terms of how you identified the specific mortuaries, is there a way that we can look at the Eastern Cape and say which districts are higher when we think of where a prevention program may be needed? That's my only question.
Thanks, Nikki. I'm Naima, our director. We'll take another question. Let's go. Thanks. One.
Morning, everyone. Morning, everyone. So thanks for the great presentation. We learned a lot of things. One specific thing that struck me, and I had to ask this, is what was mentioned about 200,000 applications for grants or competency. So does that include like police and the defense, or is it just ordinary civilians? Because that's concerning. Thanks.
Thanks, Mukwana. Adele will note that question for you. Anyone else? There's a colleague in front.
So,
Thank you very much for your question. Yes, I'll take one more from the room and then we'll switch online. Please go ahead, you can stand up and tell us who you are.
Hi everyone, I am Credence Chikuri. I wanted to ask, based on the missing data that they reported on, that some doctors were missing and some of the data was on the mortuary, but not actually with the police. So I was asking whether is it possible to have some kind of a system where all the mortuaries can be linked entirely to the system of the police, where everybody that goes into the mortuary can be like recorded into a system that automatically the police would know that there is this body that came into the mortuary. And also, I also wanted to ask about the femicide that we were talking about as being one of the forms of gender-based violence. I wanted to know, is there actually a baseline for gender-based violence? Has there ever been a national study where that actually forms a baseline for the gender-based violence, or are we just looking at other studies that are linked to women, where we just look at the femicide and everything? Have there ever been a national study on gender-based violence that acts as a baseline? If there isn't, is it even feasible to have that kind of a study?
Thanks very much, Prudence, for your questions. Naima, you'll note the one around the linkage of systems and then the baseline study. I'm just going to keep swapping mics. I'm going to move over to our online audience. And Novi, is there a question online?
There are questions online. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I think this is for Naima. If Naima, you could just recap for Poppy some of the factors that you mentioned around, but explain in the context of the decreased femicide rates over time. So what could have been the reasons for the decreases we saw, and then the incline, for us on that again. And then there was a series of questions that I'll try and summarize. So do you think that the Domestic Violence Act should cover femicide explicitly? What are your thoughts on its reference to femicide? What can be done to ensure a speedy inclusion of the history of GBV information for each femicide case? And I think this is more like a comment, but I'll mention the comments in the next round. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Novi. Naima, do you want to respond first?
Thank you. I think those were critical questions, and I'm very glad that's come. I think the first one was Nikki. Nikki, you asked, can we really, given our sample, can we identify the hotspots? So it is based on the sample. So there are mortuaries and areas that are not included. And we extrapolate from that sample. So we can't really, for this study, unless we do everything. Now, there are people that are mapping, and there are data from police can tell us where the femicides are. If police data can identify a femicide or intimate partner femicide, that is a fantastic. That is what we want to see. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. So SAPS has got data by gender, male and female. And we cannot look where that is happening because the police station will tell us the location. And that helps us identify hotspots. And I think police do identify it. They record which police stations has got the higher number of murders. And that's available on the site. So I think that data is available. But what you asked link up with a very critical question about how come this information is not linked? How come we go into a mortuary, we get a CAS number, we get even we started getting names and ID numbers, and now we need to find the investigation of the space. There's no linkages. The CAS number is a potential, but it's a written down number, and that number can change. CAS numbers change because it gets moved from one police station to another. We follow that CAS, try and follow it. So this has been one of the things that I say, technology, we know technology failed us a little bit today, but information technology is available to link the systems, the information from the mortuary to the police, to the prosecution, to the outcome. And there isn't such a system. Because then we don't need to do femicide studies if there are information systems that do that. And it's possible. We see it in other parts of the world. I believe we have got the knowledge to do it as well. But maybe we're not, yeah. I know there's a femicide watch. Global Department of Justice have got, but the femicide watch currently still in the making, and it collects data actually only of those that goes to the prosecutor. So the other question was around information being baseline. Do we have a baseline? And we have one that is the first national study, dedicated study on violence against women is being done by the HSRC. We don't know when that will be released. That will be our first one. And you ask if it's possible. Of course it's possible. Our unit has worked globally. In 2000, I went off to Namibia and helped them with their national study. Robbie went to Papua New Guinea and helped them with their national. So yes, national studies is done across the globe, and that's where we get the global data from. Unfortunately, we didn't have the appetite to do it ourselves. But it's in the making, so I hope that we're doing this. But Nikki, it's on time. Yeah. What's that all? That's me.
I'm going to move over. Thanks very much, Naima. I'm going to move over to Adele. I think there was a question from Gopana around that astronomical number.
Can you hear me? If I understand.
So let's just take that number
Is in 2020. Received and 140,000 licenses. There's almost 50,000 gap. Two or three things that are happening in that. One is, that's the most positive, is that the competency was refused, and so then the license application can't proceed. That would be the best story. But it's most likely, within many of these cases, the applications are still in process. So when you get the license application, many of the competency certificates haven't actually moved through. So it's hard to really understand what's happening in that difference. SAPs don't apply for, SAPs officers are issued with a state final license, and there's a different database for that. So these are civilian license applications. But you remember so it's an important question to ask because private security is regarded as civilians, but the company applies rather than the individual security guard. You really need to just aggregate that data. So you ask an important question making can we get that breakdown? But this is global. The majority of guns across the world are in the hands of civilians, not in the hands of states. And that's a sobering thought.
Thanks, Adele. I'm going to ask you to pass the mic to Esther just behind you. Thank you.
I'm just going to make a correction. The cabinet study done by HSRC is done.
It's done.
Yeah. It's on its way to cabinet. And the minister launched it. If you're talking weeks, we are lucky it goes through quickly. Pending which, definitely.
Thanks for that, yeah, for that update.
And it's got very interesting findings. And just maybe to just say, just listening to what you say, there's a close correlation to the it's an embargoed study, and let me not say a lot.
Sure.
So regarding the resources for the cancer, at this stage I'm mainly talking about financial, because to have home bodies you need to a financial issue. Remember, this is going to be an independent institution that needs to be fully resourced, including you need money because you don't only recruit people, but you actually need to house them, make sure that they have offices, they have money to be able to operate. So all of that that I'm talking about.
Thanks very much. All I can say is I hope the conversation with Treasury goes very well. Okay, so I think we can take another round of questions. Again, I'm going to ask anyone in the room to direct questions. We'll take another round and then we'll move to the online. Nobby said there's any further questions or comments. Harsha.
Very much.
Yes, we can.
My name is Harsha Dea. I am from the but also of the 6 of the MSc, which is the Essential Population System. I don't have a question really, but just to add a little bit. So a lot of what you're doing and this discrepancy in reported cases and unreported cases. Just say unreported cases, not a case, but unreported cases. And also SAPS has zones on the data. So there's some monitoring activities going on. But there's also another phenomenon of dropped cases along the way. Or I'm saying along from when it gets reported to before even to the justice system. So also again this is, and I think this is where victimization, bullying, whatever, hearing about families of perpetrators and families of victims negotiating the situation as well. So this is outside of the formal system. Those kind of situations are not really. Now we have a little bit WhatsApp, etc. I don't say that. We can talk about it further. We've just seen that from Docket, there are databases that get collected by SIPs. And at what point it getting dropped? There's food out there for us situation. It comes back to our society and how do we actually identify corruption? So I think there's these different data gaps that show science. And we can't collect data in its regular traditional ways. I think this is where it gets pushed that local evidence generation, the number of society organizations, the number of service points that are actually generating information data. Please tell me.
Thanks, Harsha. That really summarizes it very nicely. Francesca?
Thank you. Yeah. My name is Francesca Ponce. I'm an activist and I'm the national champion for women in the Department of Justice. I have looked at the presentation of the NRC and I am telling you I'm so grateful for the data that you have available. But I would love to see the data catch up to date. Naima, for you, do you think load shedding played a role? No, seriously, we're a national country, we must take responsibility. What did load shedding, the role it played in terms of DBV and hope a drunk that can be distracted by a TV is not as harmful as a drunk that's not. Okay? So, secondly, and then last year, August, I was with leaders in Rifkenhoekbos, led a march at night against basically the conditions exasperated by load shedding. The police station would lock up when it got dark because it had no generator. And women were raped. It was a serious condition when we developed that. Then when we look at treasury and the allocation of funding, my thought would be that, we fund a lot of things. 44 in 2012 are dealt with ESD in terms of drugs and alcohol. And the national cost, 2012, if you look at the cumulative cost factors of the drug abuse and alcohol, was 12.8 billion annually. Where is it now? If we start educating our populace, and the earlier we start, the better results we will have. Sorry, I was at a conference. The earlier we start, the better chance we have to actually teach people non-violent communication, to start off with, a relationship planning rather than marriage, as Philip was saying. And then we also look at teaching young people tools to disrupt violence. That is very effective. I've looked at countries like Iceland and Norway who at the turn of the century had severe problems with drug addictions with the dating. There's been lessons learned and we seem to want to reinvent the wheel. So my comment, and it's to all panelists, please sponsor. If we resource our education department better, should we resource our SAPs better, and all the responders better, should we resource our culture better, because that takes people away from feeling users. Should we look at where we spend, how can we curb that spending, reallocate, and actually employ young people so that they get out of the state of apathy and uselessness that is reigning, because not only are we the highest femicide, we're also the highest unemployment. I think it starts somewhere in the parliamentary commissions. Someone needs to start stepping up. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Francesca. And Naima, I'm not sure if you want to respond.
I very briefly, I think, because we're running out of time. I think, Francesca, load shedding. All I can say, so I don't know, but what I do know is that lighting use, evidence that lighting use in public spaces decreases crime. And so taking it from that point, we probably, it's a nice PhD for somebody who don't look at it, because we have data on when load shedding happens, we have data on cases reported to police, if people report to police, but I think that's a possibility.
Thanks very much. I'm going to take a question from Praise and then Bali and then we'll move on.
Mine is not a question, I just want to respond to that question. And it's to whether we should have the domestic violence act expressly include femicide as one of the crimes. First is to say this, that with femicide, if we're gonna be putting it within the domestic violence act, then it means that we are confining it within domestic relationships. But what we have done is to increase toughening sentencing, in matters, in murder cases that fall within domestic relationship. And now, in effect from the 5th of August 2022, if a case of femicide, there's a conviction in it, the court is empowered to pass the life imprisonment sentence in terms of the changes that we did. And the other one is we also tackled the bail provisions in matters of domestic cases that occur within domestic relationships. So if a person makes an application for bail, and in terms of the law right now is that you cannot get police bail. You cannot get a prosecution bail. Police bail is that bail that you apply for from the police, all right, station commander. But now that is not permitted. You must go to court and make a formal application. And if then it has been found that you have a domestic relationship with a person, with a victim. So now what we are saying is that the magistrate or the presiding officer must not grant you bail, all right? If there is no protection order. So the proceedings now will change from criminal to civil, so that the protection order is granted. But when the interest of justice, right, and justifying the release of the accused person on bail, all right. But we have tackled the bail provisions now in matters of in cases that occur between people who have domestic relationship.
Thanks very much. I'm going to hand over to Maria Solomon for the last question.
It's actually a comment following the resourcing issues that were raised. And hello, Janine. That was my first boss. But then just to comment on the issue of resourcing. There is the specialized units that we refer to as family violence, child protection, and sexual offences units. And these are specialized detectives who would normally then be called to assist in this investigation. And then when you also look at your meta investigations, I'm just looking at the detectives who are also working along those lines, who are very shy and don't want to say a word. But basically, the issue being there would be the specific skills that you would then need to utilize in case management, in protecting the integrity of the evidence itself, storing it and conveying it, all those issues, just to make sure that you have the forensic evidence that you may require in order to assist you to link to somebody, assist you to link to a thing, and so on and so forth, all those issues. Now, the FCS, there's a project for capacitation of the FCS, whereby bit by bit, we are trying to, you may have heard of personal parades, of the 10,000 project, the 10,000 kids who annually get recruited, and then from there they will be provided with specialized training related to detective and investigations, then FCS training as well, which then becomes this specialized area. So that's an ongoing thing in capacity building. Having 20 detectives at a certain crime scene, they had been worried about trampling on the evidence and messing it up and confusing, distorting the crime scene. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Dr. Ritlapi, I'm going to give you the last word.
Yeah, my question is basically, or maybe comment, is about assistance for researchers. What I see happening in Parliament, that create lots of structures, lots of governance structures. We have commissions with professionals appointed by the president, paid, but there's no money for the actual programs in society. And what you create are just all these government structures. You have the Department of Women, Youth, People with Disabilities, the monitoring and evaluation department that's under the presidents, and so on and so forth. We have Gender Equality Commission that gets paid some money. But we're talking about no equality among them, where they, and we're creating other structures elsewhere, and we're spending money on structures rather than on programs. Then they have oversight and responsibility, but nothing's happening in the community. So how can you help us deal with that problem? So that you don't have unfunded mandates, or you have commissioners that don't work, but there's nothing to have oversight for, because there are no programs on the ground that they can oversee. And how do we get to the point where we do what we did when we were dealing with HIV, where we can fund and create community dialogues on these issues? Because if you can't get the communities to dialogue about their traditional values, their traditional systems that do not see them, you're not going to get anywhere. How do we get help to ensure that you fund programs on the ground and not jobs for administrators?
Thank you very much. Excellent questions. I think we should all be challenged by working in every single sector that we work in. I'm going to hand over to Robbie for a few comments, and then I'm going to close.
Thanks, Leanne. So I just want to highlight a few. People are thankful online for the presentation, and they've acknowledged Dr. Ritlapi and some of the comments that you have made as well. And I think that the gist of one comment here is that violent men are created and not born. And so there needs to be a plan led by government that involves communities. I think that reiterates the point that Dr. Ritlapi just said, and that women should be expected to be the ones to stop a problem that isn't necessarily perpetrated by them. And yeah, and then there's been some comments as well regarding some of the stats, and I'll just share those with you. I think it's a bit more technical for this room, but it's just comments in maybe various ways that people have suggested. So Delia also mentioned, so there's a question here. What is being done about Femicide, that's the killing of one's husband or male partner, or violence against men? The SA crime stats of 2021 convey a considerable number of men being killed in a domestic violence context. So that's, I think, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, thanks very much. I'm not going to expect you to respond. I think a lot of them were comments. Just to the last question, one of the things that we do in gender health in the research is we stay on top of the cutting edge of research, and very happy to have one of our students doing a PhD at the moment looking at women's violence against men, and in particular, women's murder of men. So I wish we had time to talk a lot more. But I do believe that we must come to the end of this. And I think as I stand here, and in all a couple of months of planning this, one of the things that we were really passionate about as this unit, apart from doing the work and launching the results, was bringing together a critical group of people, work every single day in whatever sector and whatever space to protect the most vulnerable people in this country, who happen to be women. And I think if nothing else, we have succeeded in bringing some of the most critical stakeholders into the room. And I want to say thank you very much for making time We've heard from civil society, we've heard from government, we've heard from people who are working even in the private sector. There are a whole range of people that have come together. And I hope that everything we've heard, from the numbers and the statistics and the types of femicide to the stories of having lost a loved one, and I think Dr. Lekwapa represents thousands of fathers in this country and mothers in this country. And again, we want to thank you for your courage in sharing the story and in also changing that into your personal mission to make sure that everyone else affected by this gets the justice that they have. We've had civil society, Gun-Free South Africa. People are working every single day. And that today inspires new commitment to continue to do what we do and to do it better. To ensure that the next time we have a femicide surveillance study, we see that decline again, that every woman and girl in this country deserves. So we want to say thank you very, very much for that. In terms of access to information, we've had a lot of requests for material, etc. I want to say that the brief itself, the study is based, has been produced into a brief that is on the SAMRC website. You'll find it there. If you want it emailed to you, I think the register has gone around and we'll share that with you. And we've got a couple of media representatives in the room, and so we will continue to have this conversation. We were talking about the 10,000 campaign and linking that to Dr. Ledlape's plea to work at the top of the cliff. One of our top of the cliff efforts that is currently underway in our unit is a study that we call Fedisa Modikolongo. And it translates to end the cycle. And in the study, we are actually looking at 12,000 women across 4 different provinces in the country, where we're trying to understand what are the risk factors of women being killed. And it's not a fun piece of research. It's not an easy piece of research to do. It's sobering and it's traumatizing, but somebody's got to do it. And so we've got many, many brave women in the room. Some of them have traveled from Limpopo this morning. Some of them who are based here, people in Cape Town as well as those in Durban, who are working very hard to understand what are the factors that place women at risk of being killed. And how can we then begin to intervene to protect these women from reaching the bottom of the cliff? And so you'll continue to hear from us in the next couple of months. We've already worked with many of you. And I think on that note, I want to say a huge thank you to every single speaker, to the Ford Foundation for funding this work, but also to every person who works at the cold front of this work. It's difficult work. It takes a lot of who you are as a person, but somebody's got to do it. I also want to thank my colleagues at the Gender and Health Research Unit, and once again acknowledge Professor President and CEO of the MRC. A very special thank you for every single member of the team that works on femicide going into those mortuaries to identify those cases and do the really hard work that gives you the numbers. And we hope that on the one end of the continuum, we will continue to prevent what is very preventable, which is gender-based violence and femicide. And on the other end, that we respond appropriately and effectively to the lives of women and girls in this country. With that, I want to thank you and invite you to enjoy lunch with us.